Happy Friday. I hope you've had an absolutely wonderful week. I am super excited for the books we're going to talk about today. This is the Cleopatra Daughter trilogy by Stephanie Dray. So it's one woman's story over the course of 3 books. And it's one of my favorites. As I've talked about before, I absolutely love Stephanie Dray. And these were the first books of hers that I read. And I'm super excited to talk about them with you. So let's get into it. Before we get all the way into the books, though, let me give you some historical background. Most people know who Cleopatra was, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Her background is fascinating, and we can talk about books that talk about her adolescence another time because her family dynamics were wildly entertaining. But as most people know, she was the mistress to Caesar, and they had one son named Caesaron. She was then mistress to Mark Antony while he was ruling that portion of the Roman Empire. And her and Mark Antony had 3 children. Cleopatra, Selene, and Alexandria Helios were twins. Selene meaning moon, Helios meaning sun. And then they also had a son named Ptolemy. What most people don't like, what gets lost a lot in this period of Roman history, is what happened to the kiddos, because we learn about and know about Cleopatra and Antony committing suicide when Augustus comes to confront them at Alexandria, but then we lose track of the thread because we're less interested in the kids when they get taken back to Rome as political prisoners. This book, the first one, is called Lily of the Nile, and so starts with Cleopatra Selene's early childhood and shows what it was like when Augustus showed up, what happened after the travel back to Rome, being paraded through the streets of Rome, all the way through being added to Octavia's household. So Octavia, for those who do not know, was Augustus's sister, and she was married to Mark Antony, and they had 2 daughters. And when the kids came to Rome, all 3 of Cleopatra and Antony's children were placed in this house, so far as we know. After Alexandria, there's not a lot of historical record, actual information about the 2 boys. Because they were part of the male line of Cleopatra, I think it's fairly safe to assume that they were killed fairly young, but we do not know for sure, which is not at all surprising. So this book goes all the way through childhood to at the point where, obviously shockingly young, Cleopatra Selene is married off to a man of the emperor's choosing. So after Lily of the Nile and Cleopatra Selene is married off, we move to Song of the Nile. So Cleopatra is married off to some and moved out of Rome to be a queen of a African kingdom. I'm not going to give you any more information because there are multiple people that she could marry in here. So I don't want to give too much away, though. If you Google her, you'll know exactly who she married. Her husband, though, is one of my favorite characters. He's a fascinating man. He doesn't always come off super well in this story because he's an ancient man and they're all terrible. But he's just a fascinating human. This book, though, is all about her getting into her groove as queen and wife and what that looks like. Her struggle to be taken seriously as a young woman with really powerful bloodline. So how does she become who her mother would want her to be, and what does that look like to be a queen? There's a religious component around the goddess of Isis and her coming into her power and some of those pieces, which is it's a fascinating piece of her life. fascinating. She's got some interesting stuff in her life. I love Stephanie Dray's writing. I like how well researched her books are. So anything that she's written, I would definitely recommend. And this is no exception. I started reading these because there's a Michelle Moran book called Cleopatra's Daughter that aligns pretty similarly to the timeline of, this book, the first book. But I wanted to know more about Cleopatra Cellini's life post-Rome and what that looked like. In here, even in the author's note of this one, is even a tease from Stephanie Dray on what the life of Cleopatra's daughter's granddaughter was like, and what that looked like in conjunction with the Roman Empire. So I found that it even added to the things that I wanted to learn about. So not only did I learn a lot, but then it added to the people that I wanted to know more about, which I absolutely loved. If you have read these books, I would love to hear what you think. I'm a big fan. I think Cleopatra's Daughter's story is fascinating. I like anything ancient Egyptian. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Happy reading.